Our next presenter is Brenda Kress. What a wonderful soul. She's a dreamer, and she knows she's not the only one. Somehow that's a song. Yeah. She named her company Just Imagine because focusing on the possibilities is what motivates her to continually make changes in her life. After participating in a 2-year practicum in contemplative dialogue, she became a mentor, co-facilitator in dynamic dialogue. She is trained as an angelic Reiki master and in touch therapy through healing hands, healing hearts. Brenda's next dream is to bring together her training in dialogue and her energy healing practice to create a compassionate, loving space for those who are experiencing death, whether that is the death of a dream, a loved one, or of their own life. Her soul talk is called Dying to Live. Please put your hands together and welcome Brenda Kress.
I had a speech all lined out, professionally written, and I was going to recite it and be up here. And all of a sudden, this wizard called me. And the wizard is RJ. I think he's a magical being because he dropped this little bomb on me a couple of days ago, and he said, why don't you unveil your new logo for everybody and say a few words about it? And I had been working on a logo with my cousin Gina, and I went to my friend Raven Tahara. Yay! And she took the vision and made it real. So I'm thinking, okay, RJ, number one, that blew my speech apart. But then number two, it's like, what does that have to do with renewing the new? And like Raven, I went, oh my God. So about 6 years ago, my company was called the Stuart Kress Company. I changed the name to Just Imagine and started thinking about a new way to do business. But I didn't really change a whole bunch. I still was doing the same thing, and I had a different name. So because I went through this journey with my dad that I'm going to talk a little bit today, I came up with the new. So this is it, Just Imagine. And for anybody that's slightly OCD, you know all that space there when I got it back? I was told this morning that this is the field of possibility. It's not a blank spot. I can fill it with whatever I want. And that's what I'm going to do. So I want to talk a little bit about my silent partner and share with you where I got to where I am today. And that silent partner is my dad. So I learned about life through my dad's dying. So about 6 years ago, my dad, and I can't look at my mom's in the room, and it's going to be like, ah. About 6 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And from that point on, I felt like I was losing my dad. You know, it came in the back of my head, my dad's going to die, my dad's going to die. And so a little bit about my dad was a man's man. He was a Marine, then he was an iron worker. Iron working was too dangerous, so he became a CHP. After he retired from the CHP, he and my mom moved to Montana and he became a cattle rancher. When he was done, and he was also a water commissioner up there. And if you know anything about water rights in the western frontier, it's not a safe job because you're monitoring how much water they get. So that was my dad. And then they retired again, and they moved to Baja, and they lived in a little Mexican village. So when my dad was diagnosed with that, we moved him home so they could be closer to us, family, and to medical care. And the dad that came back up here is not the same dad I grew up with. The dad who came up here, hunting and fishing and backpacking wasn't really what he wanted to do anymore. He would spend more time getting excited about seeing stuffed animals or statues, little statues of rabbits or something like that. Those gave him such great joy. Kids, oh my God. My dad was very tall, and he became, well, just like RJ, he's as tall as you, and he became fixated on little kids, the joy of them. So we would be out walking with my dad, and he'd start following these little kids because he wanted to touch them. I'm like, Dad, can't do that here. Could get in trouble. You know, he just didn't understand. So anyways, I had to relook at my dad. And so I spent a lot of time in grief. Here's this man, he's nothing like my dad. Where did my dad go? So I would just be in grief that I was losing him. Until one day I realized every time I went over to visit my folks, my dad was happy. He was laughing, he was joking. He seriously was always really happy. All his little toys that I thought were kind of goofy, he had these little monkeys, and he had a dog that had a top hat, things that we couldn't make sense out of, and he had weird hats. He would be so joyful to share those. Hey, look at this, and he'd go through it. And then every time I would leave, my dad would disappear, and I'm like, oh, Dad, I got to get home. I have to go back to work. He would come walking back in with a rose every single time. He wanted to make sure. Now, did he remember who I was or what my name was? No, he probably stopped saying my name about 2 years ago. Did he know I was his daughter? Probably not, but he knew he loved me. And in fact, I want to share one of the biggest compliments I ever got from my dad in my entire life, I think, was one time my mom told me after I left, my dad turned to my mom and said, I really like that girl. She's funny. So I thought, I'll have that forever. So what that started with me, though, is realizing that my dad was happy where he was at that time. He wasn't necessarily missing who he was. Now, don't get me wrong. Please hear me. There were times. There were times where there was frustration and different things. But for the most part, my mom will probably back me up on this. My dad still laughed and joked. Now, the first thing that he lost was his ability to make sense of language. So when he was talking, we just laughed. We just laughed. We didn't know what he was saying, but my dad was a laugher, so we knew everything was going to be funny, right? So it made it a little easier. But it started a cycle for me, of grieving the dad that I lost and then being with my new dad. And so I would be with my new dad where he was at, and then I would go and I would do a little grieving. So it was a cycle, and it was new, old and then new. And so I thought everything was fine until the day he quit bringing in flowers. And he forgot that he gave me a flower every time I was leaving. So again, be with my dad where he's at and then leave and have to grieve and let that go because that part of him was gone. And when I showed up the next time, it would be somebody new. And so that started me on this whole kind of like where we're at now, death and then the rebirth and this cycle of it and letting it go. So I say that my dad became my silent partner in my business because it made me look at what am I doing in my business? I have just imagined, but what am I doing differently? Have I done anything new with it? And so what am I holding on to so tightly that I can't let go of, die to it, and then bring in something new? So for me, death was always like this, either a punishment or a journey you got to, right? Living's all great, but dying's going to happen to all of us at some point in time. But I never saw it as a part of life until my dad. My dad taught me that. So it's the same with my work. Taught me that whatever I'm doing, relook at it, let go of, and then bring in the space to do something new with it. So with my logo, like I said, with ravens, help. Feathers have always represented to me heaven, messages from the angels. That's all I told my cousin. I want feathers. Just put some feathers up. So she did this circle. And I really didn't understand the full depth of all of this until today because of that little magician in the back. And I'm sitting there thinking, the movement of it, the space, Raven pointed that out, the space in between. But also, if you'll see, my tagline is conversation, compassion, and connection. So you heard in my introduction that I'm a dialogue facilitator and mentor, so talking is big. You wouldn't know how nervous I am right now, and I'm thinking, I talk all the time, and all my friends are here. Why are you nervous? But I want to have conversations, and I want to have conversations about death. Bring it out into the light so we can talk about it. Make it a healthier thing for all of us to incorporate into life. My 6-year-old grandson can do that. The day before my dad passed, my kids brought over my 6-year-old grandson to say goodbye to his great-grandpa. So my dad was in a hospital bed, Now my daughter-in-law's crying. My dad was in a hospital bed, and we took in 6-year-old Jameson. And so he walks up to the side of the bed, and we don't know what's going to happen. And he sits there, and he looks, and he goes, Popo, I wish you and I could play together forever, but you have to go to heaven now. I love you. He left, and then he went and played. And then anybody that called the house, he'd be going, Popo's going to heaven, Popo's going to heaven. But he could talk about it. And I bless my kids for raising my grandchildren that way. But can we do that too? So I want to have those conversations so we get used to talking about it and making it a more sacred part of our life. Next is compassion. I'm working with a lot of groups that have a movement here in town about compassion. And I thought about it, and I thought, Alzheimer's is the perfect place to learn compassion in action, because when I would want to slip into frustration or all sorts of things, I'd have to stop and put myself in my dad's place or put myself in my mom's place, having compassion for my mom as she was his primary caregiver and watching the things that she went through, where I might want to go to her and say, you should do this. Well, I did do that, but, sorry, Mom. Maybe I didn't do it as many times as I might have liked to because of compassion. But I learned that, and that's something I want to incorporate into my business as well. And the last one is connection. So I feel a connection through touch therapy and angelic Reiki and different things like that. But probably one of the biggest lessons I had on what connection is one of my dad's last respite givers that came to the house. Now, remember the man's man, Marine, cop, and all that, right? They also always lived in the country. So my parents didn't live in culturally diverse places. Sacramento's pretty diverse, and this was the first time them living here because we were actually from Amador County. So anyways, our last respite giver was Sikh, and his name was Bobby. He had a turban, and he had a long beard. And I thought, I wonder how this is going to go, right? You just don't know. So Bobby thought the same thing, and he asked me, he goes, some people, might feel kind of funny. And so I told him, I said, well, about 3 days ago, his boss was at the house helping my mom and I, because my dad was real restless. So he was trying to get my dad into bed, and my dad didn't want to go. Well, my dad reached up and put him in a chokehold and squeezed his windpipe, because that's how they were taught many, many years ago. They don't do that now. And Jeff got out of it, but I told Bobby, I said, well, I think my dad will be fine, but don't lean in too close, right? So we go to the bed, and we're standing next to him, and my dad is laying there, and Bobby starts to lean down. I'm like, Bobby, no. And he leans down like this, and my dad's arm shot out, and put his hand on his beard. And he just went like this, just like that. And then he just gently put his hand on Bobby's heart, and my mic, and put his hands down. So in that moment, I saw firsthand, we are connected. We are connected beyond who we say we are, the things that define us. We're connected beyond religions, fighting, and war. And my dad, since he was on his journey out, he could see that. And Bobby was really touched by that. So I hope I haven't talked way too fast. Whoa. So anyways, I wanted to share something that popped up this morning about Bobby as well being Sikh. I didn't really know much about the Sikh religion. And Bobby had said something to me about the cycle of life, living and dying. Well, we're in that. I'm just like, yeah, whatever, because you're handling what you can, so I wasn't taking it in. And I thought, ooh, what if somebody on the break wants to talk about Sikh, right? And I'm like, I don't know. So I looked it up, and so much of their beautiful culture and custom is about that cycle of life. They don't view death the same way we do. It's about being born and then living and then dying and being born and living and dying and that cycle, right? And I don't believe in coincidences at all. So when it was time for my dad to pass, there were 3 of us in the room. There was my mom on one side, me on the other side, and this beautiful Sikh gentleman who had never witnessed death before. It was his first time. And he was there with us. And the connection was just made this morning, and I thought, he was there with us, and he saw that beauty of the movement. And so my mom and I have something I'll share with you in just a second on that. So my mom was on one side, and I will tell you, my dad never forgot who my mom was. Never. That chokehold situation, he was calling my mom by name. Karen! Now, my dad never forgot my mom's name or his dog's name. To the end, he would call Archie. So my mom was on one side, and I was on the other side. We were each holding a hand, and Bobby was there with us. And I've been with somebody that has passed. My mom hasn't. And, let me back up. There's something I want to share with you. Because originally my talk before the magician got involved was going to be about that it's never goodbye. Hours before my dad passed, and he was laying in bed, and I don't know if you've been with anybody, but their breathing gets labored and long and slow, and that's the point he was at. And I was sitting next to him. And all of a sudden, he puts his hand out like this and starts laughing and smiling. And I hadn't heard him laugh, and I'm like, and so I said, "Is that your mom?" And he went. And I said, "Is that your dad?" And he went. And I said, "He's here for you." And my dad's face just glowed. And it was in that moment I knew it's not goodbye. I watched my dad. That's not brain firing and all those things that some may say, because there was a glow on his face. And it was like a window had opened, and he knew. And for me, that was really important, because my friends will tell you, I've always said that I want to get involved with the program. No one dies alone, because I don't want anybody to be alone when they die. Well, no one is. Now I'm shifting how I see that, and I want to be there in that sacred space and hold vigil. But I'm not going to be alone sitting with them. And I learned that again with my dad. And the last thing I'll share, because I was reading something this morning about humor in death, and I told my mom I wasn't going to share this, but I'm going to. But I won't do the movements that go with it. Anyways, my dad's a huge joker. And so the day he passed, no, I'm not going to do it. My dad had a joke that he always told. And, if you know a joker, they like to tell the same joke over and over, right? So this went on for years. And it was like a tagline when my dad and I would see each other. So I thought, what the heck? My dad's laying there. So I told the joke, and there's a punchline that I won't do because it involves a little dancing. But my dad laughed. My dad laughed. And this was probably 3 hours before he passed from this world, and he laughed. And I thought, humor needs to be in there. If that's important to somebody, it was important for my dad to have humor in there. And so at his funeral, I did do the dance. Not today. So I wanted to share with you something I found this morning when I was looking at the Sikh religion. And it was something shared by one of their gurus, Guru Nanak. And it's, people of the world, don't berate death. Few know how to die. Serve your sovereign, and the path ahead will be easy to tread. Tread the easy path, earn its fruits, and seek praise hereafter. Offer the fruits you earn here, merge with truth, and receive your earned honor. In the Master's mansion, you will enjoy his love. We wouldn't berate death if we knew how to die. And that is so important to me in learning how to die. And so with my dad passing, with both of us holding a hand on his side, we're able to watch as spirit left him. His color changed, and my dad's eyes are like a baby blue, and they just glowed, and then, and you could feel the spirit leave. And my mom's like, "Yeah, I didn't like that part." Yeah, Mom, a lot of people don't, but it was a very sacred moment. So it was at that time I knew very firmly in my heart, no matter what happens and what loss we feel or go through, it is never goodbye. And so now I'm saying TTFN. It's ta-ta for now. Thank you.